Hello, Ms Mazur's class. We're going to read today The Toy Brother by our beloved William Steig. And we're going to close read. What it means, I'm going to stop, point at the word, and explain their meaning. Magnus Bede, the famous alchemist. Alchemist, it's before we had science, we had a proto-science. It's like the ancient chemists and magicians, and his happy-go-lucky wife Utilda thought they had a harmonious family, but their oldest son Yorick considered little Charles a first-rate pain in the pants. So this is their oldest son, and this is their youngest son, Yorick and Charles. Charles, a first-rate pain in the pants, always occupied with something silly. So older brother thinking, "You, Charles, are too silly for me." Mr. Bede made the mistake of allowing Yorick to be his apprentice. Apprentice means a student. And Yorick got the notion that he would eventually surpass. Surpass means become better. His father as an alchemist. He had visions of accomplishing such unheard of miracles as turning plain old donkey dung into solid gold. Old donkey dung means donkey poop. He's going to turn poop into gold. As for Charles, he spent his time chasing chickens, poking around in ant hills, and arguing with the goat. He couldn't fathom, he couldn't understand why Yorick avoided him except to give him a wallop, a smack, every now and then. So it's a typical two brothers, right? Not getting along. The big brother doesn't want to spend time with his younger brother. One May morning, Magnus and Utilda were making ready to journey to far away wedding. Mrs. Bede reminded the boys to milk the goat and feed the animals, and Mr. Bede again warned Yorick, "Don't forget, you are still no alchemist, so stay out of my lab." The beads soon disappeared over the hill. They would not be back for at least a week. Okay. Charles was glad Papa had forbidden York the lab. He hoped that now, at last, they would get to be palsy walsy. So the author makes out his own words. Pals, it means they're going to be pals. They're going to be friends. Perhaps even do some chicken chasing together. But Yorick had other ideas. So Yorick is climbing to the Papa's laboratory. Uh-oh. So Charles went off on a ladybug hunt. He caught a couple when he spied something thrashing towards him through the weeds. He assumed it was a mole until he heard it saying, "It's me, Yorick, your brother." It was indeed Yorick, down to the minuscule means tiny wart on his knuckle. Even his finger had tiny little wart. "Egad!" It's an exclamation like, "Oh, wow!" Charles gasped. "What happened to you?" "What does it look like?" said Yorick. "Don't tell me you snuck into father's laboratory." "Yes, goosewit." I guess it's another word that a writer made up so he can get calling his names. "Yes, goosewit," said Yorick. "And I invented a new potion. But when I tasted it, zazing! I was no bigger than a cockroach. So I squoze under the door. And here I am." Squoze, it's a made up word. He squeezed under. So he was trying to make this like past tense. Charles rushed inside the kitchen when Yorick clinging to his thumb, squealing, "Don't drop me, you dolt." Dolt is, and again, he's calling him names. It was just too marvelous, too wonderful. Yorick had made himself as small as a sausage. This is a good form as quiet as a cricket, as small as a sausage, as small as a sausage, and with only a drop of training. Look at his tiny brother. His big brother became tiny brother. "Stop staring, will you?" said Yorick. "I have to undo what I did, or Papa will murder me. You got to help me." "Okay, Peanut, take it easy," said Charles. "There is still oodles of time till he gets home." Oodles means a lot. It's another slang word. A lot, oodles. Meanwhile, Charles announced, "I'm going to build you a house." "But what about the lab?" "Don't rush me," said Charles, humming happily set about making Yorick his very own house. So it's almost like his toy, right? Toy brother. This is how book is called, and he made him a house, right? Charles was relishing, enjoying this immensely, enjoying this very much. Immensely means very much. And when his toy brother stuck his head out of the window of his residence, in his place where you live, his residence, it was all just as real as peas and beans. So even though it's magical, it's still like real, like vegetables on your table, as peas and beans, the expression. "Brotherkins," Charles said. "It's dinner time." So he made up his name like tiny brother, Brotherkins. "It's dinner time." He served up three crumbs, three tiny little crumbs of bread and a spoonful of clabber cheese. He himself was too excited to eat a thing. Look at him looking. He cannot believe his brother is so tiny like a toy. Running the show was so gratifying. Means to be in charge of his big brother was felt so good that Charles found himself wishing Yorick would fit in his pocket forever. Yes, it was rotten to be thinking this way, but how could he tell his brain how to operate? So even though he knows that his brother's stress is like, it's so interesting." In the morning, Charles decided that Yorick needed some fresh air, so he took him out for a walk. Suddenly, the sky darkened, the wind started howling, and they were pounded by hailstones, tiny little pieces of ice, big as cherries. To Yorick, they felt like cannonballs, so they felt huge, the size of a basketballs. Oh, sorry. "Help!" he cried. It finally struck Charles that his little bit of a brother would always be in danger. It finally struck, it means he finally understood it. He got this idea. He's like, aha, now I understand. My brother will be always in danger. He could easily be stepped on by a donkey, even by his own dear mother. He could he could drown in a bucket of milk, get eaten by a thoughtless cat, or be seriously injured by a field mouse who was feeling his onions. Feeling his onions means feeling bossy, like knowing what they like mouse feeling tough. Charles didn't want any such thing to happen, even if it meant he'd have to be the baby again. He means he placed his brother into his tunic as a long shirt that men used to wear, and hurried home to put lard, some fat, on his wounds, like instead of a Vaseline or special salve to put special fat to protect his brother. Yorick, he said, we've got to make you big again. Let's get to work. This is another contraction. We've got to, it means we have to. We have to make you big again. Mhm. Now Yorick took charge. "Papa taught me that each ingredient, means each substance, every element you take, water, oil, vinegar, in a potion, in a mix, has its own special antidote. Antidote, anti means against, something that acting against it. We've simply got to find the right ones. How about this pink stuff? Charles said. No, said Yorick, just do what I say. After mixing this and that and that and the other, Yorick believed he had what was needed. But one single drop on his tongue made him retch, means throw up, and black out, means he lost his consciousness, he passed out. Charles was sure Yorick was dead, but he came to. So when you gain your consciousness, you came to. Black out and came to in less than a minute, looking very embarrassed. Brother, he said, this is a job for a professional. We better wait for Papa. To make the time go faster, Charles tried to keep his brother amused. First, he dressed the goat up in one of his mother's best outfits. So he's dressing this like, this is our mama. And then he squeezed the pig into his father's purple tunic, long shirt. But Yorick wasn't amused. He only wanted to be his real self again. One night, Yorick shook his brother awake and said, what if I never get big again? Yorks, said Charles. I'm sure Pops can make you big again. But just in case he can't, and you have to stay in this condition, I'll take care of you as long as you live. Mhm. Even after I get married, whether my wife likes it or not, whether my wife likes or not, no matter what, I will take care of you. And I mean it. So don't worry, you little noggin. Noggin is a slang for head. So don't worry, you little head, about that. At daybreak, the boys heard familiar voices calling, Yorkie! Charlie! They scrambled out of bed and out of the house. Means crawled out quickly. They scrambled out of bed and out of the house. And they were their two parents. Charles, this is Charles, got hugged and kissed again and again, as if they had not seen him for a year. Look at this, Yorick hiding. And where's Yorick? They wanted to know. This is where is contraction. Where is Yorick? They wanted to know. He is, Charles said, holding him up like a carrot. The beads were bowled over. Means absolutely shocked. They stared at tiny Yorick, at Charles, at the wide mysterious heavens, and at each other. At last Mrs. Bede took up her son, kissed his little head, and held him to her bosom. It means she hugged him to her chest. Mhm. My cheek, she sobbed. She cried. Sobbed means cried. My itty bitty bantling. Teeny tiny baby bantling. Alakaday, the father murmured. This is another like expression. Oh gosh, oh my, the father murmured, said in a low voice, right? What happened? And Yorick told his happened, and Yorick, his flabbergasted parents hunched over him, told them his shameful story. Flabbergasted means absolutely shocked. So they're looking at him, and he tells Mom, Dad, I didn't listen to you, and I was messing in Dad's laboratory. Magnus Bede carried his son straight to the laboratory. Is this your original potion you mix? Is your original potion still here? He asked. Yorick showed him the flask. Flask is one of those little bottles, and everything he had put in it. This is another contraction. He had put in it. Had put in it. Barrage, Bethany, Comfort, and sauerkraut. Barrage, Bethany, and Comfort are plants, and sauerkraut it's a cabbage. When you pickle cabbage, it's actually delicious. Don't worry, said Mr. Bede. I can whip up the cure in a minute. Whip up means make it quickly. But the cure had no effect. So Dad did everything, but it doesn't work. Are you sure you remembered everything, Yorick? Think. Yes, Father, I did. Well, think harder. Something's got to be missing, said the famous alchemist. So he is alchemist, like a scientist. The antidote wasn't working. The the special potion to act against his original potion is not working. Utilda Bede cheerfully stared. Utilda Bede cheerfully started making tiny clothes for her tiny son. A tiny bed is a tiny bedspread, so it's everything that goes in a bed: the blanket, the sheets, a tiny chair with a cute little cushion. She cooked him tiny puddings and baked him dainty pies. Dainty pies means it's like a very miniature, very fine looking, like a little work of art. Her new baby kept her too busy to worry. Tilda, Mr. Bede said finally, I give up. Well, said his wife, so he will stay this way. Who cares? He's strong, handsome, and brave, and he has a fine horoscope. Horoscope is that when you're born, they say because of this day you have this destiny, and this is a chart what's going to happen to you. So because they live in the past times, they believe in horoscopes. Let me drink some of your potions, Charles said. Then we can be twins. So he loves his brother so much, he's ready to become teeny tiny himself. Gadzooks, said Mrs. Bede. What a noble idea. Gadzooks means, oh, wow, said Mrs. Bede. What a noble idea. I will drink it too and be a proper mother for you both. Perhaps Mr. Bede will join us like a proper father. And who, Mr. Bede screamed, will look after us, minikins? So what father says, who will take care of us of tiny people? Everyone clammed up. Everybody became very quiet because it's true. If they're all tiny, how are they going to take care of themselves? That evening, after supper consumed in silence, eaten in silence, Mr. Bede said, Son, I fear you're fated to be our little elf forever. Son, I fear that it's your fate. It means it's your destiny. This is what's going to happen. It's your fate to be this tiny. And he sighed a long, sorrowful sigh, reeking of ginger. Reeking means smelling bad, stinking of ginger. Ginger, ginger, Yuri cried. I ate some ginger before I drank my awful potion. Awful means my terrible potion. So ginger is the missing ingredient. Aha! Magnus Bede exalted. Exalted means said in a very excited way. Ginger, that's a fish from another pond. This expression in this case means this is completely different story. That changes everything. Is it any wonder there was no transmogrification? So this is another made up word. It's like transformation. So the magic did not happen. Now I know what to do. They all ran to the lab. There, the truly wise alchemist took his original formula for restoring his son's stature and added pot cheese to counteract the ginger. Stature means height. Original formula for restoring his son's height, stature, and added pot cheese to act against the ginger. He fed the mixture to Yorick, reciting these words, saying out loud these words: Orkins, Borkins, Google, Kedufel, Kefifel, Kefafel, Kefraffel, Kafrum. Magnus beat, chewing his lip, his wife chewing her nails, and Charles chewing her apron, all stood goggle-eyed, means with eyes wide open, as Yorick swallowed the antidote, shivered, shook, and shot straight up. Shot straight up means grew to his full height. Ta-da! Whereupon, it means right after that, the whole Bede family, especially the proud father, went all together out of their medieval minds. Medieval, it's a time in Europe between 5th and 15th century, long, long ago. When you're thinking about the dragons and castles and alchemists, this is when it happened, medieval times. They hugged and kissed, wept, laughed, sung, yodeled, then raced around like a bunch of maniacs. So they were back together. Hooray! But Yorick still dreamed of turning donkey droppings into gold. So Yorick still wants to be alchemist. And little Charles developed a passion for making toy dolls which somehow all resembled Yorick. So when the younger brother started making little dolls, toy, and they all looked like his brother. Resembled means looked like. The two brothers sincerely appreciated each other now. Means they truly understood how valuable, how important they are for each other. Except when they were having a fight. As usual, brothers, one day they play, the other day they fight. The end.